Imagine, for a moment, a time, not actually that long ago, when launching a cannabis delivery service in California was, well, almost as simple as registering for an herbs and candles business.
Seriously, that's not an exaggeration.
No, really. We're talking no state licenses, none of the complex bureaucracy we see now, no seed-to-sale tracking, just basically a car, some cannabis, and you get yourself listed on an app.
Sounds wild, doesn't it? Almost unbelievable today.
It does. Well, you're about to find out it was very, very real. Today, we're doing a deep dive into California's incredible, largely unregulated cannabis delivery boom.
It's quite a story.
It really is. It's a fascinating tale stretching from, clever loopholes and just massive, explosive growth all the way to an inevitable, pretty dramatic crackdown. So get ready for some surprising facts, some really vivid stories, and hopefully a clear picture of how this market went from, the literal Wild West to a highly structured industry, almost, it feels like, overnight.
Yeah, the timeline really tells the story here. It shows the scale of the change. We're digging into a pretty significant period for the industry, basically starting from 1996, when California first legalized medical cannabis.
Prop 215.
Right, Prop 215, all the way up through the huge regulatory shifts that really landed around, say, 2018.
Okay.
And it was an era that saw literally thousands of these informal, unregulated delivery services just sprout up. And then, just as dramatically, they mostly vanished, giving way to this much more consolidated, corporate-dominated landscape we see now.
A real boom and bust, almost.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really compelling case study in how fast a whole market can just evolve and totally reshape itself.
Okay, let's unpack this then. So the earliest sparks of this Wild West era, they actually ignited right after California voters passed Prop 215 back in 96. That's the Compassionate Use Act. Now, while it bravely legalized medical cannabis, the big issue was it lacked any real statewide oversight. There wasn't a comprehensive licensing structure.
Right, that was the key gap.
Exactly. And this created what many people in the industry started calling the gray zone, sometimes affectionately, maybe sometimes frantically.
Chuckles slightly.
Yeah.
Probably both.
Probably both, yeah. It was this kind of legal limbo where the delivery boom first really, really took off.
Exactly. And in this almost totally unregulated space, delivery collectives, they became the real pioneers. You had these innovative services popping up like SpeedWeed, co-founded by A.J. Gentile, you mentioned.
Yeah.
And also the Green Cross, which became pretty well known. They were thriving simply by filling a very real need, a real demand.
And the barriers to entry were just incredibly low.
Oh, remarkably low.
Yeah.
That's the striking part. If you wanted to start a cannabis delivery business back then, it wasn't some massive hurdle. You didn't need $1 million investment or a team of lawyers.
So you mentioned incredibly low barriers. Low almost feels like an understatement from what I've gathered. Just how simple was it? If someone had minimal resources, what did it actually take to get one of these services running back then?
It was really quite astonishing. Kevin Reed, who founded the Green Cross, he famously put it like this. Launching a delivery service was like registering for an herbs and candles business.
Wow.
Yeah, think about that.
Huh.
Fundamentally, all you really needed was a phone, a car, obviously some cannabis to deliver,
Right.
and getting a listing on one of the popular but also unregulated platforms like Weedmaps or Leafly.
Huh.
There's no state license needed, no really tough background checks, just
Yeah.
a willingness to operate in this gray area.
Okay.
And that's precisely why thousands of these services just appeared, almost organically. Felt like they popped up overnight. This super easy entry just fueled this explosion of, entrepreneurial activity.
So it wasn't total lawlessness then. It was more like a system that actively used very specific legislative loopholes. That's a really interesting distinction, isn't it? Which brings us to something crucial that let these businesses run without formal state licensing, this patient-to-patient loophole. What exactly was that about?
You got it. This huge growth wasn't just random. It was also strategically helped by what became a really key legal interpretation that came out of SB 420.
SB 420.
Okay. This piece of legislation basically allowed nonprofit caregiver collectives to operate using a donation model.
Ah, the donation model.
Right. So essentially, it let medical cannabis patients share cannabis with each other or with their designated caregivers without technically making a commercial sale.
Clever.
Very. So groups like NorCal Natural Collective, for instance, they leaned really heavily on this legal gray area. They'd classify their transactions as patient donations, not sales.
Gotcha.
And that let them exist and even really thrive without the formal state licensing that, a normal commercial business would need. It was pretty ingenious, if maybe a bit audacious, exploitation of that ambiguity in the law.
Okay, so while this Wild West definitely fostered a ton of innovation and let people start businesses easily, it must have also created a really volatile and risky environment for everyone involved, right? From the drivers to the customer.
Absolutely.
What were some of those like hidden costs of having basically no regulation?
Yeah, you hit on a really crucial point there. One of the biggest, most immediate challenges was the total lack of banking access.
Right. The cash problem.
Exactly. Imagine trying to run a business, maybe even a multi-million-dollar one, completely on cash. It wasn't just inconvenient. It fundamentally shaped how the whole industry worked.
How so?
Well, on one hand, it created this sort of underground economy, right, which actually boosted margins because you weren't paying banking fees, maybe dodging some taxes. But on the other, huge downside. It basically painted a giant target on every operator's back.
Yeah.
Robberies were incredibly common.
Scary.
Very scary. Every delivery driver became a potential target. And, of course, a massive amount of these sales happen completely outside the tax system.
Yeah.
It's a pattern you see a lot in these brand new unregulated markets. This booming but incredibly fragile shadow economy emerges.
It sounds like just an incredibly high-stakes game. And because these operations didn't have actual storefronts, they were also really elusive, weren't they? Like ghosts, almost. Hard for anyone, customers or the authorities, to really pin down.
Absolutely. That mobile nature was a double-edged sword. Most services were run out of apartments or maybe someone's house or these kind of makeshift dispatch centers, often just a couple of phones and maybe a whiteboard.
Oh.
There was no paper trail, no fixed address you could easily find, no public record. This made them incredibly agile, yes, but also, crucially, very difficult to track or shut down for good.
Right.
So if an operator got raided or got a cease and desist order in one city, they could literally just rebrand overnight, change their phone number, pop up with a new name, maybe in the town over, with hardly any interruption.
So it was like whack-a-mole for the authorities.
Exactly. A constant game of whack-a-mole for any local authorities trying to get a handle on it.
And this evasiveness, plus the lack of oversight, that leads straight to a massive buyer beware situation for the actual consumers, right? What were the real risks if you ordered cannabis from one of these services back then?
Oh, the consumer risks were significant.
Yeah.
Huge, really. Without any mandatory lab testing, something we just take for granted now in regulated markets, consumers had absolutely no way of knowing what they were actually putting in their bodies.
Yikes.
Yeah. We saw rampant issues, really inconsistent quality, products mislabeled all the time, even products contaminated with things like pesticides or heavy metals.
Oh, wow.
Scams were pretty common, too. Products might not be as potent as advertised, or it might just not be what the customer ordered at all.
So what could people do?
Well, consumers were basically forced to rely heavily on reviews on platforms like Weedmaps. But as you can imagine,
Not always reliable.
not always reliable, is putting it mildly. Those listings were often just riddled with fake reviews, misleading info. It was a really opaque market, kind of built on trust and word of mouth, which, could be easily exploited.
So with all these risks, the scams, the quality issues, you'd think cities would step in, right?
Yeah.
And they definitely tried.
They did try.
But without that state-level framework, their efforts were pretty much, like you said, that game of whack-a-mole. A service gets shut down in one place,
Pops up elsewhere.
pops up somewhere else with a new name, new phone number, basically overnight. It was deeply frustrating for them and largely ineffective, it seems. This legislative vacuum finally did spur some action at the state level with the Medical Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act, the MCRSA, in 2015.
Right, MCRSA. That was the first real attempt.
It was the first serious legislative try to bring some order to the medical cannabis market, including some initial steps towards delivery regulation. But even MCRSA had its limits, right? It wasn't the complete overhaul the industry really needed.
No, it laid some groundwork, maybe signaled the direction things were heading, but it wasn't the big one.
Okay, so MCRSA laid some groundwork, but it wasn't that seismic shift, that pivotal moment, the real game changer that just reshaped this entire industry that finally arrived in 2018 with Prop 64. What was its immediate, dramatic impact on this whole gray market delivery scene?
Prop 64 fundamentally just changed the entire landscape. It initiated adult use, recreational cannabis, yes, but critically, it required state licenses for all legal cannabis operations, including delivery.
All of them, no exception.
No exceptions. Suddenly, for a delivery service to be legal, You absolutely had to have state licenses, and you had to use the METRC tracking system.
Ah, METRC, seed to sale.
Yep, the state's seed-to-sale tracking platform. It's designed to track cannabis products right from cultivation all the way to the final consumer.
Right.
This immediately brought in significant compliance costs, new taxes, really strict operational requirements, things that the vast majority of those gray market services just couldn't handle. They couldn't absorb it.
So what happened?
The effect was dramatic and swift. We estimate nearly 90% of those existing gray market delivery services were basically crushed out of existence.
Yeah, 90%. Wow.
Yeah, they're either unable or just unwilling to make that transition to the new, highly regulated environment.
That's an incredible number. 90% just wiped out. So out of the kind of ashes of that unregulated market, we saw the really rapid rise of licensed giants, right? The players who could meet these new tough requirements. What did that look like on the ground?
Precisely. For the companies that had the capital, maybe the foresight to invest early in compliance, Prop 64 was actually a huge opportunity for rapid, legitimate scaling.
Like who?
Well, think of companies like Ease, which became a really major player in the licensed delivery space, or Urban Leaf. Urban Leaf is a great example. Their driver numbers jumped from maybe 10 before licensing.
10?
Yeah, just 10, to a whopping 115 after getting licensed.
Big difference.
Huge difference. These businesses could now attract serious investment money, build out proper logistics networks, operate totally openly without that constant fear of raids or shutdowns.
Right.
They were able to consolidate market share really quickly, professionalizing the industry in a way the old gray market just never could.
And this also must have had a huge impact on the platforms themselves, the ones that kind of fueled the boom in the first place, like Weedmaps, right? They basically listed everybody, legal or not, for years. How did Prop 64 and the regulations finally force them to clean house?
Yeah, Weedmaps is a key part of this story. They had benefited massively from all those unlicensed listings, right?
Yeah.
All the traffic they generated. They were eventually forced to comply, though. They definitely held out the longest.
Longer than Leafly.
Oh, yeah, Leafly, another big platform. They'd cleaned house much earlier. They chose to align with state regulations sooner. But Weedmaps, well, by 2020, they were facing a very real, very immediate threat. Staggering fines. We're talking $30,000 per day from the state for facilitating unlicensed sales.
$30,000 a day. Okay, that'll get your attention.
Chuckles, it certainly does. So facing that, Weedmaps finally removed more than 2,700 unlicensed listings from its platform.
Wow. 2,700.
Yeah. The era of just openly allowing non-compliance for these really crucial directories was well and truly over. It marked a definitive end to that free-for-all period.
So looking back now, what actually happened to those original pioneers, those, herbs and candles entrepreneurs like SpeedWeed or Mendo Meds or the Green Cross? Did any of them manage to pivot and survive, or did they mostly just become casualties of these new regulations?
Many did, unfortunately, become casualties. The capital needed, the legal fees involved, just the sheer complexity of compliance. It was an insurmountable hurdle for countless small operators.
It's too much.
Way too much for many. Those that did survive, like the Green Cross, they had to adapt significantly. I mean, really invest heavily in the new regulatory compliance, get state licensing.
What did that involve?
Oh, acquiring multiple permits, implementing that whole METRC tracking system, paying substantial taxes, and fundamentally restructuring their entire business model. It was a massive undertaking.
And the others?
The others, well, they simply couldn't make that leap. Maybe they lacked the resources or perhaps just the desire to navigate that complex new landscape. And they just vanished from the market entirely.
Wow.
So yeah, the legacy of that era is pretty clear. Regulation brought this undeniable push towards compliance, which led to huge consolidation and ultimately a market dominated by larger corporate players with deep pockets. It really did close the chapter on California's wild, unlicensed delivery boom, ushered in a completely new era for the industry.
And there you have it. That's our deep dive into California's really extraordinary journey from that freewheeling, largely unregulated cannabis delivery landscape to the much more structured, licensed industry we see today.
Quite right.
It really was. And understanding this specific evolution, I think, offers really valuable insights into the broader challenges, the transformations that happen in any rapidly emerging market. Doesn't matter what the product or service is. It's a powerful lesson, really, in how innovation, if it's left completely unchecked, eventually seems to demand some kind of framework, for safety, for fairness, for sustainability.
Absolutely. And if we kind of connect this to the bigger picture, it does raise an important question, maybe something for you, the listener, to think about.
Yeah.
How do societies really strike that balance,
Yeah.
between the spirit of innovation and entrepreneurial freedom, which often just thrives in these gray zones,
Right.
and the critical need for consumer safety, for fair competition, for regulatory oversight, especially in these new emerging industries? What's the ongoing cost and maybe the benefit of allowing a Wild West phase to kind of flourish before regulation finally steps in to bring some order?
Yeah.
It's definitely something worth mulling over, I think, long after the dust settles on this particular story.